Queen's Park has a new leader of Her Majesty's official opposition. The Liberals are proceeding on two controversial files. Oh yes, by-election fallout from Sudbury still. Lots of Queen's Park stuff to chew over with Jess Spindler. We're happy to welcome her to TVO for the first time. She's a former advisor to a cabinet minister of this Liberal government. And John Mykytyshyn returns. He's the president of the Bradgate Research Group, one of Mike Harris's original common sense revolutionaries. Great to have you both here, and thank you for taking the... Did you take the train or the bus in from Kingston?
Oh, I drove in.
You drove, all right. Okay, well done. Patrick Brown is now in the legislature. He won his by-election. He's now able to lead the Conservative caucus during question period. And I want to know, I guess, John, off the top, how much does that matter in terms of his efforts to be more present in the lives of Ontarians?
A lot and not at all. So in the world of the political people who are paying attention to politics today, in Ontario, outside of the federal election, it matters a great deal. And for that 1% or less of Ontarians, he's doing a great and stellar job. But the reality is the 99% of the people plus who aren't paying attention, who don't watch question period, who don't care what's said there ever until an election is called, the real work is outside of the building.
Well, to be sure, Jess, not a lot of people stay home during the mornings and watch question period live, but of course the clips end up on the news and he's quoted in the newspapers and so on. You've had a chance to watch him in his first couple of weeks on the job. How's he doing?
Yeah, I mean, and just to follow up on what John said, I think it is important that he now has a seat in the House for a couple of reasons. First, because it brings some legitimacy to his new position as the party leader. And second, because it gives him the opportunity to interact directly with the Premier. In terms of how he's doing, I mean, there's only been a couple of meetings of the House so far. I'd say he's doing fine in that regard. But I think over the next few weeks and over the course of this session, he's going to need to really show Ontarians who he is as a leader. Not many people know much about him. He's a bit of a newcomer to provincial politics, at least. So, I mean, in terms of showing Ontarians the direction he's going to be taking the party in and who he is as a leader, I think that's going to be what people are paying attention to over the course of this session.
Sat in the House of Commons, of course, for 9 years, but never asked a question, quote unquote, in anger. He's now having to do that for the first time. How much of a learning curve is that?
I think the way he's been asking questions says it all. It hasn't been in anger. He was very clear when he started out saying that he would be different. He would ask questions that were necessary. So if he sees something that the government's doing that he agrees with, he's going to say that and give the government kudos. And if he sees something to hold them accountable for, he's going to do that. Now, with the government that we have, there's no shortage of things to hold him accountable for, and that has been the majority of his questions so far. But even there, not from anger, not from hostility, but thoughtful and pointed, and I think he's been doing a great job so far.
I've been listening. Have you heard a compliment yet for the Liberals?
I think we're a little short on compliments.
Which is not completely unexpected. He's handed out the critic portfolios. Right. He's kept the education critic job for himself. Why did he do that, John? Education matters to him. Okay, but surely the province's finances matter to him as well, and he didn't keep that for himself. So why did he keep education? No, I think it's the thing that's closest to him. I mean, all leaders do that, right? They pick the thing that they're going to be the most comfortable with, and gives them more than just the angry man or angry person comments. So it gives them some meat to dig into. And, you know, education along with health are the two biggest portfolios representing the budget anyway in the Ontario system, so it's a good one to have. Why do you think he kept education for himself?
Well, I mean, it's not unheard of, I suppose, for a leader to hang on to one of those files for themselves. I mean, we saw the Premier do that when she served in the dual role as Premier and held on to the agriculture and food portfolio. Mm-hmm. But in this case, I think it is interesting. I mean, obviously education's important, but I don't believe Patrick Brown has an education background particularly. So I suspect that this may have something to do with the new health and physical education curriculum.
Better known as the sex ed curriculum.
Yeah, that's right.
So he's kept education for himself because he wants to ask those questions in the House?
Well, I'm not sure that it's because he wants to ask the questions in the House. He hasn't brought up anything in the House yet, as far as I can tell. But I think that may be a file that he wants to keep close for the time being, given some of the sensitivities around that file.
Okay, so here's the real deal, John. The real deal is, it's not that he wants to ask the questions about education, he wants to prevent some of the social conservatives on his backbench from asking those questions. Isn't that what it's about?
No, I mean, you know how caucuses work. They speak with one mind. They agree with what the caucus is going to say, what the party position is. That's true of all political parties. You hash out whatever differences there may be in the caucus room, so that wouldn't be the case at all. I mean, I think he just simply wants to have you know, his hands on a portfolio that interests him the most.
It's not that he wanted Monty McNaughton not to have any role in all this.
No.
Really?
No.
Okay, let me follow up with this. He's a new leader, so he's got a new seating plan. Mm-hmm. The former leader, Tim Hudak, is not only not on the front benches, he is the critic for financial services, which is a fairly junior assignment for a former leader of the party. Again, what are we to make of that?
I think it's amazing that Tim Hudak is still in the House. It's not an usual thing in provincial politics. Not that we see it recently, but we see it much more in the federal House, where you've had former prime ministers who've stayed on years later as MPs. So relatively new to Ontario. Usually our system provincially is much more up and out. Mm-hmm. And the fact that Tim wants to continue and wants to play a role. But having said that, he was just leader, and there's a certain toll that exacts on anybody, a certain dedication, a certain amount of time away from the family. And, you know, so having a role that's not necessarily one of the frontline critic portfolios right now is a good breather until we form the government in a few months.
In a few months? Aren't you optimistic?
It's coming quickly. People are saying 3 years. It's not 3 years. According to the Premier, it's going to be here in 30 months.
Jess, how do you read that Hudak assignment?
Well, I mean, I think John would have more insight into the decision there. But, I mean, I don't think that the new leader had much of a choice but to distance himself from Hudak. I mean, the previous leader is the leader who campaigned on a promise to eliminate 100,000 public sector jobs. So I can see if you're someone who wants to take the party in a new direction, as he said he's going to do, and we'll see if that happens. But if that's the promise that he's making, I can see why he would want to create some space between him and the previous leader.
Okay, let's move the spotlight off the opposition now and onto the government. The government, as I suggested earlier, is proceeding full steam ahead with two of its higher priorities. Number one, the selling off of 60% of Hydro One. Number two, bringing in this new Ontario registered pension plan. So let's talk about those two things. Jess, the polls are overwhelmingly against the government on the sale of Hydro One. And my question is, should the government, as a result of that, pause in what it's doing?
You know, I don't think the government should be pausing on this. It's thought long and hard about the decision to broaden the ownership of Hydro One. It's a decision that the Premier herself has said was not made lightly. And I don't think that you can govern, you know, solely based on what the polls are saying from one day to the next. I don't think that that's leadership. And I think that we all accept that when you're in government, there are tough decisions to be made. And I'd agree that this is one of them. But I think we all would agree that the province needs to be making some pretty substantial investments in things like infrastructure. And that was one of the central promises of the most recent campaigns. So in order to pay for those infrastructure investments, we need to generate revenue. And I think this is a creative way about going about that. And there is a downside to not diversifying the ownership of Hydro One and to into partially privatizing it. And that is that we'll miss out on this revenue that I think we desperately need in order to make some of those investments.
As a pollster, John, would you agree that even if 80% of the people are against what you're doing, that ought not necessarily to be definitive? If you've made a decision, you've made a decision.
I think it's a moment and an opportunity for courageous leadership. But courageous leadership takes you in one of two directions. It either defines for you that this is the right policy, we're committed to it, even if it means the destruction of our government and our party for the next few years, and that's what you do because you believe it's the most important thing for the province. That being said, I also consider myself more of a big D Democrat than anything, and that's I believe in listening to the people. So there's if this is a government policy that the Premier believes in, then before it happens, she should be out there using everything at her disposal to disposal probably what she should do with it, but to sell this thing and get support for it, because clearly Ontarians do not want this. And let's be clear why. It's a crisis of leadership. It's bad fiscal management. The place is falling apart.
You guys tried to do. Hang on. You guys tried to do it when you were in.
We looked at it, and we didn't do it. Well, one might suggest we didn't do it for reasons.
No, Harris tried to do it. Yeah. Eves canceled it.
Yeah, because they're listening to the people.
Because the public was against it.
Right.
So Ernie Eves had a rethink on it.
Exactly.
Jess, you want to come back on that?
There were a couple other major policies, like selling TVO that, were in the original plan that didn't happen, because when you get there and you have conversations with people, you say, well, maybe we should change our mind on this. But the hydro one is such a glaring example of public policy that's repudiated by the people and that's required given the track the government's on. Like, given the spending spree they've been on, continuing to make the choices they're making and have it recognized as irresponsible by the credit bureaus, we're in the situation we're in, and more to come. When this is sold, I don't know what they're going to sell next.
Tough sell, this one?
I mean, I would agree it's a tough sell, but there are a couple of things that I did want to continue to drive home. Number one, that it's not a full-blown sale. The government still retains 40% ownership. So in any large company where buyers can't purchase more than 10% of the ownership in that company, the government will still have substantial influence over the entity. Another reason that I want to address, I think that a number of people are opposed to this because, and the Conservatives have succeeded in pushing this message, is that there's some link between the partial privatization and an increase in rates. And that's simply not true. I mean, the Ontario Energy Board right now is the regulatory body that must approve any rate increases. That's not changing with the broadening of the ownership. That will still be in place, and I would expect and will expect that the Ontario Energy Board will only approve increases to rates that are reasonable.
I was going to say, and to be fair, we don't know what we don't know in the future, because the reality is I don't think anybody before the last election was talking about this or would have believed that a premier would consider this. And you're right about the 10% ownership, but the reality is for any corporate structure, once you go below 50%, somebody's got, once you're less than 50% ownership, then you may have ownership, but you have no control.
What about the argument, though, that it actually is the Ontario Energy Board that approves or doesn't rate increases, and for those who fear that this partial privatization will mean rates going through the roof, that's not the government's call, that's the OEB's call.
I think it's pretty clear government policy for years and years has been that, under the Liberal government is dedicated to price increases when it comes to electricity. We're the highest jurisdiction in North America, with every 6 months they're going to go up. The government is committed to increasing our electricity rates for the foreseeable future. I don't know what that means when it becomes privately held. Everybody's that I talk to says that it's going to get worse, not better.
Let's put the second item on the table now, and that's the new pension plan. And again, we've seen over the last couple of weeks, in particular, the business community come forward and say, this is a bad idea, we can't afford this, please don't do this, Premier Wynne. How do you think the Premier's responded so far to those pleas?
Well, I mean, this is, again, a plan that she campaigned on, that the Liberals campaigned on, and as someone who went door to door in the last elections, it's something that I think people were very enthusiastic about at the time. So it's important that the government moves forward to continue to roll out this plan. We know that people aren't saving enough for retirement. About 2/3 of Ontarians don't have a workplace pension plan. So this is an opportunity to address that before things get worse.
They did put the brakes on a bit, John. They did say if you're a smaller business, we'll give you more time to bring this in. If you have X number of employees and they're covered with a plan that's, I think, comparable, is that the word, comparable to what we have in mind, that's okay too. So it looks like the Premier's tried to put a bit of water in her wine here. Good enough?
No.
Why not?
It's another way to destroy business opportunity and kill jobs in Ontario. There's nobody outside of the Liberal Party that's advocating for this proposal. The underlying causes and situation about people not having enough pension plans, either through employment or on their own, there's a real concern, there is a real problem there. But that's the same, a similar thing would say we also have record personal debt that we're all carrying. Well, the government's not stepping in there and saying we're going to mandate a limit to everybody's credit card limits, or it has to be paid within 90 days. I mean, there's lots of economic problems for the province and for individuals. This is a bad plan that's only going to hurt Ontario.
the federal government has helped other provinces implement their own pension plans. It's refusing to do that under Stephen Harper for Ontario. What do we read into that?
Kathleen Wynne can't get along with people.
As opposed to the other way around?
Well, Stephen Harper, you just said it. They've been able to work with other provinces, but not with Ontario. And who represents Ontario but Premier Wynne?
How do you read it?
I read it as very unfortunate. I mean, I was shocked when I read that he was delighted that his decision to not allow the CRA to have this plan dovetail off of the system that's already in place was something that would make him happy. I mean, he said that tax-free savings accounts are a way for people to save. Of course, those are not required. We know people aren't using those to the full advantage, so we need to be doing something now. I don't think it's good enough to down the road be telling people who find themselves in the situation of having inadequate retirement savings to be saying to those people, too bad, you should have opened a TFSA when you had the chance. You should have taken advantage of those voluntary measures when you had the chance. I think we have the opportunity to do something now. We're asking employers to make a very modest contribution to the retirement savings of the people that they directly employ. It is a modest plan. It's not a tax. I think it's irresponsible for the PCs to call it that. We don't consider the CPP a tax. We don't consider other workplace benefits to be a tax. This is a positive step that's going to help millions of Ontarians.
It's not a tax.
It's a tax.
Well, if it's a tax, then the CPP is a tax.
Yes.
Okay, so you're being consistent. I mean,
yeah.
tax is revenue.
When the government says to anybody, we are not by your choice, we are going into your pocket and taking out money or out of the business that you work for because we know better than you.
No, but it doesn't go to the government. This money doesn't go to the government.
Okay.
Well, it doesn't. So therefore, it's not a tax. I mean, so goes the argument.
Again, depends how it's structured, depends how it's changed down the road. But government, whether they're taking money directly or forcing you to give it to somebody else, it's a tax.
Last item on our agenda today, and that is, after 9 months of investigation, we have finally seen something, I guess the other shoe fall in the Sudbury by-election story. Good news from the government point of view, the Deputy Chief of Staff to the Premier was not charged.
Yet.
Bad news? Yet. Okay. Bad news from the government's point of view, this story is back in the news and people are talking about it, and it is a controversy. Let me just ask a nice, neutral, lean, open-ended question. What is the big takeaway from the Sudbury by-election business for you?
I think the big takeaway for anyone who's involved in elections is just to make sure you're very familiar with the rules. I mean, we all want to make sure that they're being followed, whether it's during campaign time or when the government's doing its regular business.
John?
Sad day in politics. I mean, again, I totally agree with what you just said. And how can people who represented a government who've been there for as many years as they've been there now not know what the rules are? Senior people having conversations they should have never gone anywhere near. That's a sad day for politics because, again, as we've talked about before, politics is filled 99.999 with good people with good intentions doing the right things for the right reasons. And we may have philosophical differences on how we'd approach things, but I would never assail her character or her motives. But here you have people who've gone outside of the lines, apparently, allegedly, because nothing's been proven yet.
Still to be determined.
Yeah. Right. But it goes down the, if you go away from what the charges were, right, and the fine points of what the law is, somebody wanted to run and somebody else wanted them not to run, and they wanted to change that outcome. It wasn't like, hey, anybody wants to run for anything, run. Democracy will be heard. No, it was people conniving in the back rooms to trying to convince, persuade, buy somebody out of running for something. It's all the vestiges of bad old times in politics, which, should be long gone from Ontario.
And one man, Jerry Lougheed Jr., has been charged, and we'll see, I think the 18th of November, he has his first court date, and we'll see what happens.
And again, so part of what goes into the whole conversation is who knew what when. Apparently, from what's been said, people purported to represent people directly. Like, did he represent the Premier? Didn't he? Who had what conversations? Will we ever know the truth? What will people believe? The whole thing is a mud pie, and it doesn't help politics in general.
Well, and I think that's exactly what this process is going to, to bring to light. Is it'll put a fine tooth on the facts, and the court will decide based on the facts that come to light.
No, what the court will decide is what can be proven in a court and what there's evidence for. So if somebody actually had a conversation saying, we want this to happen, get it done, and that was over the line, and the next person in the line takes the bullet and says, oh, I did it on my own, I'd never had a conversation with somebody else, that's the problem you end up with these things.
You have to acknowledge what's different in this case is we have tape recordings.
Many tape recordings.
And but we have tape recordings so we have a better sense of what was said.
Right.
But let's be honest, all parties do this all the time, right? Can we all acknowledge that?
No.
You can't acknowledge that?
Not anymore.
What do you mean?
I think things have changed because of the laws, because people are paying attention. Is it everybody? It's like drinking and driving. People still break the law. People still do stupid things. In the world of politics, look at all the different levels, from professional, full-time political staffers all the way down to volunteers. There's a very different scale on the experience level of people, and people who may have made honest, stupid mistakes because they thought they were acting within the law, not even being aware that they were completely outside the law. Or was it something more sinister from the back room as being directed? And that's the part that I don't know if it'll ever be answered, but the questions will always remain. And I think that's the worst part, is when somebody goes over that line, that's all you know is it's the rumor and innuendo that wins the day.
Okay, you two, thanks for this check-in at Queen's Park. Jess Spindler, your television debut. I thought it went swimmingly.
All right.
Thanks for joining us. John, you're always terrific, of course, even though you're a veteran.
Thank you.
Jess Spindler, John Mykytyshyn. Good of both of you to join us at TVO tonight.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.